This is our sixth and final part on our series about Dutch whaling in the 17th century. This video is going to describe how the whale was processed after it was killed. In this case, I'm going to describe how the whale was processed first on a ship and then brought to the whaling station or back to the Netherlands. If a whale was caught near a whaling station, all these parts will be the same, only the processing and the cutting up of the whale will be done on land. When the whale has been dragged back to the ship, it will not be processed immediately. Just after dying, the whale will float just under the surface of the water. And within a period of 3 days, the whale will start floating higher and higher on the water. Some say even so high that on the third day you could step from the deck of the ship onto the whale. If they wanted to keep hunting within this period, they would drag the whale behind the ship. And if they wanted to process the whale, they would tie the whale at the side of the ship. The speksnijder, or fat cutter in English, often wears leather clothing to keep the whale fat from seeping into his normal clothes. He also wears spekijzers. These are metal spikes that can be tied under his shoes or boots to keep him from slipping off of the whale. He uses a particular kind of knife, in Dutch called een flensmes, to cut off strips of fat from the whale of about 300 pounds. And on a ship, these pieces of fat will be hoisted off of the whale onto the deck, on which most of the crew will be waiting with spekmessen, with fat knives, to cut the whale blubber into smaller chunks. These chunks would be stored in barrels in the hull of the ship. These could be taken to either a whaling station or back to the Netherlands. The Dutch did not render their whale fat into oil on board of their ships in the 17th century because of the fire hazards. Apparently the French did render their oil on board, which often seemed to lead to ships burning down. It took till the 18th century that the Dutch started to render oil on board of their ships. Whale blubber could be rendered into whale oil at whaling stations, like on the island of Jan Mayen, or at Smerenburg on Spitsbergen, or back in the Netherlands. At these whaling stations or back in the Netherlands, there would be cookeries with boiling houses, with big metal cauldrons filled with water. In these cauldrons, the blocks of whale fat would be boiled. The fat would melt and float to the top, and the impurities would sink to the bottom. Then the fat that floated on the top of the water would flow to another reservoir where it would cool, and there even more impurities would sink to the bottom. This process could be repeated a couple of times until the oil was as pure as it could be. It seems that the crews on Dutch whaling ships, especially the hunters with smaller crews who hunted on the open ocean, had a sort of flexible occupation. Like the harpooners who differentiated themselves from the rest of the crew by their boots. When there were no whales to hunt, they would just do the same work as the rest of the crew. They would just have their normal station next to being a harpooner. Some experienced commanders, because Dutch whaling ships, they weren't called captains, they were called commanders. Some experienced commanders would also be harpooners or helmsmen on one of the sloops. And also harpooners could often, because of their experience, also be speksnijders or fat cutters in English, or just help cut the fat on board, because in every facet of the whaling profession, they just needed to be as efficient as possible with the whole crew. So everyone always had work to do. With the kapitaalschepen who process the whale on land at the whaling stations. The harpooners had a bit more freedom because there were more men to cut up the whale blubber and everything like that. At the stations, the occupations were more separate than on the hunter ships. Well, this concludes our series on Dutch whaling in the 17th century. I hope you liked it, and if you have any questions about any of our videos, please leave a comment. We really appreciate you watching our content. And now we're going to look at a coin spin.